With 4 million sounds, what will you create? Take the free trial today.
Hello, welcome to another part of our Superbooth Home Edition coverage. We're actually coming direct from Berlin this time, which is about as close as we can physically get to the actual Superbooth. But this time we're talking to Dave Linenbank at Bitwig, and Bitwig have just announced 3.2 beta, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the tagline being "Colour your sound." So I guess really you need to show us what's it all about, Dave.
Let's get out the crayons and we'll jump right in. There's kind of two sides of it. One is manipulating any audio coming in and fine-tuning it, crafting it. The other is manipulating MIDI note streams, things you might already have sequenced or you're used to playing, and turning them into something different, maybe a little unpredictable. So let's jump straight on the audio side. If I run a little sound in here, we've got our new EQ Plus device, which is showing me some rainbows to begin with. And if I were to just simply click, I'm already creating a band in it. And now I'm kind of seeing that the output spectrum is the reduced one, the input spectrum is the bar up top, so I can see both at the same time. I'll click again, I'll throw a low cut perhaps, and maybe even grab this little audition handle so that I can focus just on this filter. It's kind of bandpassing everything else out for the moment, so as I fine tune I can hear it, I let go, and I'm hearing the whole sound again. Yeah, so you'll notice as we grab each band and we're moving it around, the controls themselves, that entire band, its colors are following what the frequency is set to for that band. So this is an idea that we've taken and tried to extend across the program a little bit. If I were glancing over even at Polysynth here, which has a filter, as I move its filter cutoff, it happens to be following the same color patterns that I've got on the rainbow spectrum up above. So as 20-some devices start having some of these frequency controls, often for filters, sometimes for tuning, you start getting a kind of sonic muscle memory of, oh, that frequency is, I see the color, I can kind of connect it already before I even start digging in.
Ah, right, okay.
So as usual, interface has kind of been a big thing.
Yeah, good plan.
Yeah, so up to 8 bands, new algorithms, adaptive cue to keep things in line, all the good stuff. So that's one part of the audio side of things. If we were to look separately, we do have a new saturator device, so I'll trigger a little bit of organic recording there. So just on the front panel, I've got a drive control for overblowing things and a low-pass filter for rounding it back out. Like you would kind of expect in most distortions or wave shapers. But if I go ahead and unfold this, and maybe we can glance at it in the help view, what you actually start seeing is a range of controls for both the quiet and loud portions of the sound. So you can set different thresholds. So now we've kind of just made a flatline clipper that we can see. But instead of just clipping, you could then say, wait, but what do we do after the threshold point? So maybe we let it gradually get louder so it becomes a kind of subtle coloring effect instead of just a brute force clipping type thing, or even a knee control to round out what's going on there.
Oh, neat. So sort of dynamic control of the sort of inner workings of the saturation. That's quite a unique idea, actually.
And so if I were to play a little bit more drive, we get into different portions of the sound. A bunch of knobs here to make the negative and positive excursions get treated a little differently. You can kind of see it in the transfer function flattening over here, which is just a lesson from guitar cabinets or anything else. When you treat the negative and positive parts of the sound differently, you get a richer set of harmonics coming out. And then for the quiet part, if we were to turn off our loud processing a little bit, the quiet part's interesting too, because it's one thing to say, I want to make the sound quieter in general, which can be its own kind of clippy distortion. But you could also say, no, don't get quiet at all. Actually stay quite loud until silence. So now the louder portions of the sound are relatively unaffected, but just the quiet portions are turning into something more beastly, let's say.
Yeah.
So a lot of controls in there. We haven't even turned the filter back on for rounding it out so we could hear what's going on. But a lot to work with there and a lot of fine-tuned controls. Additionally, there is a grid module version of this. So along with the other wave shapers, you could slot it in and do it in a polyphonic way so that each note gets its own shape to it.
Neat.
But yeah, a couple different ways for just shaping audio in general. I alluded to note processing. We could jump over to that for a minute. A simple example here, if I were to take an organ that happens to have some envelopes applied, and we can see as I mouse over that it's lighting up which drawbars are going to move when the envelope moves. Each of these envelopes now has its own quiet delay function to say how many 16th notes, or seconds, milliseconds, should I wait before the envelope triggers. So now if I play one note, you can get an evolution of sound very quickly just with this one basic organ we've got going on.
All right, I can see the harmonics moving there.
Yeah. So they're just going to keep moving on their own over time because some of them are just waiting longer. There would be ways to try to trick something like this by setting long attack times and then starting it later, but this is just a much easier way to say I'm focusing on something evolving, I'd like it to move. This is just an easier place to start, whether it's a modulator or a full instrument layer. We have options for that too.
Neat.
Let's see. In addition, our arpeggiator. Let's play with it the old way. Zero that out. So we've got a whole bunch of new shapes here, including this one, which is repeating the low note over and over again. So even if I just change that, I've got a lot more control while it's still acting like an arpeggiator. Just a little bit more of a human interaction. Or even to start in the middle of this 3-octave range and spiral out as it goes. Some different shape options there, and also some different time options. Because we've been asked from people about sound design possibilities to work in milliseconds sometimes. One, it's easier to change them very back and forth, or just to create something different altogether.
Oh, that's nice.
One up. So a different way of controlling everything. Additionally, under the hood, if you're using an MPE controller, the pitch values are followed for each step so that it's going to keep those things going even if you're sliding around. And it can also use polypressure messages from any controller that supports it to replace velocity. So as you lean on different notes with those kinds of controllers, you'll actually get different results kind of coming and going and growing. Yeah. So
And that,
a lot
so
of
you,
tweaks there.
so what was that? What's that orange bar that's going on up there? Is that because that was transposing when you first came to it? I thought.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. We should pull it up. So in addition to controlling velocity and gate length per step, we now also have the option to transpose individual steps. So maybe 5th up, a 5th down. I'm just going to play one note.
Oh, so it's starting to get a bit more like a sequencer, I guess, when you're doing that, right?
Yeah, a bit of the idea of step sequencing on top of the notes that are being played.
And can you make the gate length go longer than 100% so that it sort of rings out, or is it just fixed at that?
You saw that little bar there, didn't you?
Yeah,
Sure.
I did see that. All right, so you can make kind of chords.
Yeah, if you want overlapping notes. If you don't, you can always kill that in the inspector over here. But it allows it, so it's less of an arpeggiator and more of an actual kind of harmonizer in a sense. Yeah, range. It's nice to have range. So on top of that, our last area of focus that touches 3 different devices, we've always had instrument selectors. So if I go ahead and switch, all of these sounds are loaded already And then I'm just picking the target layer for new notes as I play with it. Now, Bitwig has modulators, plenty of modulators. That would be one way to control the target layer, but now there's easier, more direct ways that are a bit interesting. If I go into the inspector, there are now voice modes for each of the selectors. So the obvious case would be something round robin, like you would often get in a sampler or a drum machine kind of thing, to say each note that comes in should just automatically go to the next step. So if I'm just playing a simple pattern over and over again,
right,
it's going to be different each time that it comes through. Or chords, each note is just going to get sent to one of these different layers. So that would be one way to look at it. There's other examples like free voice mode. This is particularly interesting for our hardware CV friends, because if you're in free voice mode, it looks at each layer and just says, oh, there's an active note here. Let's avoid that layer and use a different one. So if you loaded, say, multiple copies of our hardware CV device on different layers and assigned them to, oh, my oscillator 1 gets these gate messages and pitch messages, my oscillator 2 gets these, you could fake polyphony on a CV thing pretty easily, and you just decide how many notes you want to use. So that's a little bit off the deep end, but it's interesting in both places. Random cycles around through, or key switching. So if I say MIDI learn and I'm going to set my root key, so now I've got a range of notes that just switch the layer that I'm targeting. So a lot of film scoring people prefer this method for switching between layers when you have multiple articulations or other things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of classic contact way of switching big orchestral samples, but just as useful for, I guess, MIDI instruments or virtual instruments or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, nice to have samples plus synths plus plugins and whatever else and switch between them. Exactly. So maybe two off-the-wall examples real quick. One over here. One of those arpeggiators we were looking at, running into a bank of slightly modified, but still organic, cowbells. So if I were to hold some notes.
Oh, neat. So they're like 808 variations. They actually start sounding like modular stuff now. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, use it with a drum instrument, use it with a synth. Just start with one, duplicate the layer, make a variation, and now different notes that come in this case through the arpeggiator, are going to have a different sound and feed it differently as it goes. So that's one different way of looking at it. Ooh.
Jazzy.
Yeah, all right. So last little sideways example, we have the instrument selector, it has the voice modes. We have note effect selector, it has the voice modes we saw with arpeggiators and things. We also have the regular FX selector for audio. So why would you put notes into an audio stream? Let's play around for 1 second. We have this replacer device, which is kind of a classic. Listen to audio, analyze a certain threshold or frequency, which you can see with the red lines here. And when that is met, send a note somewhere. So normally, oh, I crossed a threshold, let's trigger a sample, whether I'm replacing a hi-hat part, or in this case, having a stab go, or whatever it is. So if you've already got this kind of idea that audio can be analyzed and trigger notes when things change, well, now we have effects selector, which can use those notes and randomize the audio effects path based on the audio itself.
Oh, neat. So you've got different delay, spin-offs, and ring mod, and feedback, and reverb. That's cool. Yeah, nice.
Exactly. So again, all different methods of coloring sound and just taking something that you've already have and being able to turn it into something new. I mean, that's kind of the essence of tools, that they work for you. So hopefully things work. We are in beta now.
Excellent. So what's the process? I mean, how do people get hold of this? What's the kind of deal?
Sure. Bitwig.com. It's got everything, but the short version is if you own Bitwig, you can download the beta today and start working with it. We plan to have the final release happen by the summer sometime. Sooner the better. And once that's done, the day that it comes out, if you have an active upgrade plan when it's released, then you have the new version. That's always been our upgrade model. It gets you a full year of whatever happens. So yeah, it's out there. Test it. Tell us what's going on. Play with some rainbows.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dave. That's awesome.
Thanks, Nick. Good to talk to you.